Each age of Albion had iconic locations, and with them, moments that changed the course of history. The Old Kingdom era brought with it heroes. The First Age of Heroes brought with it Bright Lodge and an attempt to rebuild Albion. And the Second Age of Heroes restored balance to the land through the Heroes Guild. Under the leadership of Weaver the Guildmaster, Albion flourished as heroes ventured the land and helped the population in need. But as with all tales of good and evil, not every hero was a hero, and not everybody wanted to be saved. Even still, almost every one of these superpowered humans graduated from one location through years of training their minds and bodies, a place that molded many of Albion's legends, but also a place that led to many of their fall. How did this location form? Why was it so important? And what ultimately happened to it? In this video, we explore the lore and story behind the Heroes Guild. The fall of the Old Kingdom left the mystical, magical, and treacherous land of Albion as a wilderness of uncertainty. What came next were the Fallow Wars, an especially interesting period of time in which those gifted with the heroic abilities of skill, will, and strength were lured in by the natural beauty of the Old Kingdom witch, Yogg, and eaten alive. For centuries, Yogg absorbed the abilities of the heroes she ate, and as a result, the heroic population dwindled even further. Without heroes to battle evil forces, Albion fell even further into darkness. As with all tales of heroes and villains, Yogg was eventually defeated and the Fallow Wars came to an end. The evil witch was cursed and her power was limited. Without a great evil, generations passed and the population increased. Within this population, new heroes were born. From the village of Pine Scrub to the Deadlands of the North to Hightown, new heroes came into being and a new age began. The Age of Heroes. Centuries after the defeat of Yogg, a civilization formed, ruled by a self-proclaimed king, Arthur Brutus Cadwallader Wendoglass. The quarry town of Grey Rock hugged the edge of the Talendale forest and supplied brick, cobblestone, and high-quality rocks to Albion. The plaza of Hightown was filled with merchants who called out to customers from their stalls for weapons, clothing, food, potions, and exotic hairstyles, and heroes were seen as celebrities as they hunted the redcaps, ogres, outlaws, and even the Birdmaster, who used his killer chickens to harm the locals. At the center of it all, the town of Bright Lodge was ushered as a hub for heroes by the king to pick up quests. He truly wanted to help Albion stay balanced against evil forces. However, this age of legends came to an end, an age of many heroic tales, heroes and villains, the cause of which is unknown, and Albion once again plummeted into darkness. The land fell into isolation for centuries as the few villages sealed their gates. They attempted to protect their own from the outside world as bandits, pillagers, and mercenaries fought for food, land, livestock, and even women of a childbearing age. In this dark period, an old man, wizened and stern, returned to this broken land. He wore a tattered blue cloak and tarnished golden armor, the very same he had worn before he left the kingdom he had built to fall to his corrupted children. Scythe was the first hero, the first Archon of the Old Kingdom, and he wanted to make things right, to usher in a new age of peace and prosperity. He looked around as mercenaries sold their swords to the highest bidder. Old Kingdom ruins were pillaged for artifacts for sale, and villagers fought for survival. The forests of the land once again grew over Old Albion, and prophets preached about the end of the world. Yet, Scythe knew that Albion still had many heroes who had once again fallen into obscurity, and they could be used to restore balance if guided properly. Bright Lodge had had the right idea to bring heroes together to fight against the dark forces that plagued the land. So, Scythe attempted to trigger the Age of Heroes once again. Bright Lodge had had the right idea to bring heroes together to repair Albion, but it had failed. Scythe could do things differently. He had a plan. The first hero sought after someone who could unite Albion under one banner, a hero who could be a legend. It was then he searched across the Edgelands, the dark forests of Witchwood and the ruins of the north. To the east, he discovered a young bandit and mercenary by the name of Nostro. In a fractured Albion, heroes held no allegiance to good or evil and used their natural gifts to get by, and Nostro had done what he needed to do to survive. Yet, he had always wanted to leave his mark on the world, and before him, he had two paths, one of good and one of evil. Scythe foresaw how important this choice was, and he decided to intervene. The ancient hero introduced himself as Scythe to the mercenary, and he told him that he could help him use his power for good. Nostro, just like every hero, was a part of an ancient bloodline, his bloodline, and he wanted to train him personally to restore balance to the land. With a brighter path in front of him, Nostro accepted Scythe's offer and they began. Under Scythe's guidance, Nostro was taught how to be a leader of men. He was trained personally and taught everything possible about his natural abilities of skill, will, and strength. Albion was a dangerous place, and under the orders of Scythe, Nostro traversed the Fey-infested woodland, the troll-damaged swamps, and Balverine-occupied forests as he reactivated Cullis Gates to allow teleportation between lands. In each region, he introduced himself to every hero he found, and invited them to become a part of an exclusive order, the Guild of Heroes. The fallen, forgotten city of Bright Lodge had been more of a hub for heroes to visit to pick up quests and recuperate, and Scythe wanted to improve upon this so that it would not become a part of the same cycle of death and rebirth. It was here in central Albion that the Heroes Guild complex was constructed, a place for both young and older heroes to live and train their skills. The first structure completed of this region was the Chamber of Fate, a place for heroes who graduated under the tutorship of the leader of the guild, Nostro, and later those he trusted to train new heroes. As decades passed, the guild expanded. New living quarters were constructed to house heroes and children who displayed heroic abilities for training at the academy. The guild libraries became home to arcane knowledge, secrets, and the history of Albion. Specially built training rings were used to perfect the art of will, skill, and strength. A demon door even spoke to those who passed it with its riddles. Inside, a stunning, ancient library of lost tomes and an elixir of life. The local guildwoods also offered the residents a peaceful break from the challenging life of training. As for how the guild ran on a daily basis, from the servants' quarters, non-heroic staff were hired to tend to the built-in tavern, to cook meals, to clean the complex, to run the store, and the other mundane tasks that allowed the apprentices to focus their energy on their craft. Each role was just as important as another. Everyone played their part for the future. Just as Scythe had hoped, the Heroes Guild restored balance to Albion as the heroes represented their order and helped those in need. The heroes used the Cullis Gate to teleport to their quests and made the roads safer to travel once again. Villagers were finally able to breathe without the threat of a bandit attack. And most importantly, heroes became a guiding force of good in the land once again. Through Scythe's influence, Nostro and his guild officially ushered in peace and prosperity through the Age of Heroes. The population felt safer than they ever had, and Nostro was hailed as a legend. He became one of the most well-known people in Albion during this age. This came with a lot of power, wealth, and influence, something others wanted for themselves. As the leader of an order that was home to heroes of immense power, there were always bound to be moments in which they disagreed, and these turned to conflict. To combat this, Nostro commissioned an arena on the island of Witchwood, a place for anyone to settle their disputes in public. Everything was dealt with in the ring, and they left their issues in the sand when they left. The guild itself became a staple of Albion. Nestled between Greatwood Forest and the town of Bowerstone, it became home to the best and brightest the land had to offer. Aside from the grand libraries of Samarkand to the east, it offered vast knowledge to help the heroes understand their land and its ancient secrets. Yet, as with every tale in Albion, when there is a strong good force, an evil will always attempt to corrupt it. This came in the form of a power-hungry courtesan by the name of Magdalena. Nostro was as close to a celebrity as Albion had, and he had many admirers. Unfortunately, he chose the one person who did not want him for him, but wanted him for the power and influence he held. Over time, Magdalena's corruptive influence began to change the hero. His guild slowly transformed from a place of honor and prestige into nothing more than a house of mercenaries who were driven only by a lust for profit and fame. Nostro, infatuated by Magdalena, could not see how far his guild had fallen. With her influence, the arena that had once been a place to deal with issues before they became something more turned into a place of gruesome entertainment. When Magdalena had taken everything she could from Nostro, she took the children he had given her and used their heroic abilities to claim power in other regions of Albion. It is said by some that she became the ruler of Bowerstone, and through her bloodline, so too were her children. Scythe had really hoped that his personal molding of Nostro and the formation of the Heroes Guild would end the constant cycle of death and rebirth of faith in heroes. But he was wrong. Nostro had failed him, and once again frustrated by the actions of one of his children, he left the hero to his fate, just like he had done to the Old Kingdom. And it was so. For years, the Heroes Guild fell from its former glory, and the mercenaries inside used their power and influence of the complex to get what they wanted. But still, Nostro continued to run the complex alone, without friends or family. As he grew older, one evening as Nostro tucked into his meal, he tasted something off, and he knew exactly what it was. The position of the leader of the Guild of Heroes came with power and influence. Even in this corrupted state, he knew an assassin had struck. As the poison coursed through Nostro's veins, he called out to his mentor, Scythe. Although frustrated with the path Nostro had chosen, the old hero could not deny this final request, and he returned. In Nostro's final moments, Scythe stayed with him and comforted him. Yes, Nostro had performed bad actions in his older years as a result of his meeting with Magdalena, but he had done something great with his life too. The good outweighed the bad. Nostro had ushered in the Age of Heroes and constructed the Heroes Guild. The balance of good and evil could still be restored. As for now, Scythe told Nostro that he had done good with his life. When Nostro eventually succumbed to the poison, Scythe once again stepped back from Albion and waited for another worthy hero to help him restore the land to its former greatness. The death of Nostro was an incredibly important moment in Albion's history. Having lost the leader of the most recognizable establishment in the land, many fought to claim the vacuum of power, and whoever took this spot would once again set the trajectory of Albion. Having dealt with the mercenaries and evil-minded population for too long, a group of will users entered the guild and claimed control of the complex by force. Weaver was one of the most powerful will users of his generation, and those who opposed him bowed at thought. But he did not use his power for evil, he used it for good. As the new Guildmaster of the Heroes Guild, Weaver started the guild from scratch and established a new code for each member of the order to follow. The population of the settlements of Albion could once again request the help of a hero, and the hero could accept this request in the form of a quest card in the map room in return for a payment of gold. The gold was to be paid upfront to the guild and to be given to the hero upon the completion of the quest, and during which the hero had to complete the request to the letter and obey the local law enforcement. Heroes were trained to be a good influence on the land. Under Weaver the Guildmaster's leadership of the Heroes Guild of Albion, for centuries, heroes once again restored order and safety to the land. Scythe even made himself available to Weaver and those the Guildmaster had chosen to lead the complex. It appeared that everything the ancient hero had wanted was finally in place. However, we all know that in Albion, nothing is that simple. As the years passed, new heroes came and went as they travelled through on legendary quests. Of note, there was Solcius, a mage who had sacrificed himself to save Bowerstone, Delphi, an evil-turned-good sorceress, and Holder, a commander of the Dragon Knights. As a boy, Maze was brought to the guild for training after his parents were killed by Balverines, and as he got older, as another extremely strong will user, he stayed on as leader of the guild as Weaver continued his duties as Guildmaster. These halls and the land was full of history. Statues of ancient heroes, and graves of those who had helped Albion greatly in one way or another. As a widely revered region of Albion, some of the non-heroic population even signed up for a tour of the guild to learn of its history and to see the heroes in training. Everything seemed to be great. One evening, Maze returned to the guild with a young boy who had survived the awful massacre of his village. The small farming village of Oakvale had been burned to the ground by bandits, and the boy had lost his family in the raid. Over the following decade, the boy trained with the guild and graduated, just like so many others had before him. But he was different from the rest. He was stronger, faster. He had a natural affinity for not just one of the 3 hero disciplines, but all 3. It appeared that he was connected to an ancient bloodline of heroes who possessed great power, but with great power came great conflict. It was also during this period in the Age of Heroes that Jack of Blades made himself visible to Albion. To the population, he claimed to be a hero of heroes, but in reality, he was a demon who used his parasitic dark magic to hijack the bodies of his hosts to live through them. As the young hero of the fallen village of Oakvale trained his skills and went out into the world to make change, he entered into a battle that had begun aeons before with his ascendance, a battle that turned into a war between the heroes and Jack of Blades. Jack wanted to enslave the population of Albion to his will, but he needed the Sword of Aeons to restore his power, a sword hidden away within the Chamber of Fate by Scythe. But it was the strength of the hero of Oakvale who defeated this great evil. Although many tell the tale of that battle and how sections of the guild fell in the attack, they forget to mention the many heroes and citizens of Albion who also died during this conflict. To remember them, a memorial garden was constructed on the complex. What was for sure was that the defeat of Jack at the hands of a mighty hero showed Albion that heroes really were needed to stop evil. And from the crowd, the children who looked upon the mighty hero of Oakvale wanted to be just like him when they grew up. This moment was the peak of the Age of Heroes. But when there is a peak, there is also a fall. Around 20 years after the fall of Jack of Blades, Albion had truly entered an era of peace. Without the evil, demonic influence of Jack of Blades, the scale tipped and good beat the balance. However, without a grand evil force to battle, the large population of heroes became reckless to the regions they visited, rude to non-heroes, and entitled. Heroes had once been strong, resolute, and brave, but within the villages and communities, they became the problem the population complained about. Since the death of Jack, Oakvale had been hailed as the home of the Jack Slayer, the birthplace of one of the greatest heroes to have lived, but the population of this region had had a change of heart. Since their hero had seemingly disappeared from Albion, the ones who had followed were arrogant, rude, and reckless when they passed through. One of them got drunk at the tavern and burned down a row of houses. These superpowered humans had too much influence in Albion, and the citizens were powerless to stop them. Some were happy to take their gold and to thank the good heroes for their service, but others saw all heroes as a problem. It was in these years that the region that had birthed Albion's greatest hero established the Oakvale Anti-Hero League. They were tired of being a second-class citizen and called out to everyone who had been bullied, extorted, and injured by these menaces. There was no great evil of Albion anymore, and heroes were relics of an ancient time. In what could be a new age, the Age of Enlightenment, they should focus on engineers, doctors, inventors, and natural philosophers. With these, they could expand their cities, attain healthier crops, cleaner water, and fuller lives. At first, this was just a small movement, but as the heroes continued to work across the whole of Albion through the Heroes Guild, more of the population came forward with their own stories and anger at the heroes. A shopkeeper from Knothole Glade was robbed by a hero who wanted her stock. A travelling merchant was scarred after a hero failed to protect him but still took payment, and another hero ignored the cries of a child who had been taken by Hobbs so that he could get to the tavern before it closed. The guild was aware of their reputation and how it continued to fall, but the Guildmaster refused to step in. He truly believed that it would pass by. Heroes had followed their destiny for good or evil for centuries, and everything had balance, but he could not foresee what was to come. The discovery of gunpowder in the hills of the eastern land of Samarkand changed everything. With a growing relationship with the nations outside of Albion, the population of Oakvale discovered the firearm, hand cannons that fired a small ball of lead, and as unrest continued, the Anti-Hero League got a lot louder. They believed that in this Age of Enlightenment and Age of the Firearm, the Heroes Guild was no longer necessary, and finally, with the power to defend themselves, they gathered all of their supporters and took the fight to them. In a day that changed everything, the Albion Anti-Hero League struck, from Witchwood to the Edgelands, Oakvale, and more. The non-hero population of Albion entered the Heroes Guild with their firearms and murdered every hero they saw. Although the heroes were gilded with skill, will, and strength, they were no match for the onslaught of lead. The Heroes Guild burned and their bodies fueled the flame. The people of Albion had had enough of their antics and put this ancient order in the past where they believed it belonged. Those without heroic ability who pleaded for the lives of the heroes were labelled as hero sympathizers and hero lovers, and they were ostracized and attacked by society. As for the heroes who had avoided the Heroes Guild massacre, they were hunted down by hero hunters and ordered to fight in the reformed Witchwood Arena for their lives. If they won, they were still executed. The age of heroes was over, and the death of so many heroes wiped out the potential for the birth of new ones. Children with heroic gifts were raised in secret, their abilities hidden from the world, and when of age, they were warned of the dangers of showing people their gifts. As for the Heroes Guild, over the next 500 years, nature reclaimed it, and it sunk into the ground just like the tombs of the Old Kingdom, Bright Lodge, and other relics of an older age. Albion had lost its heroes, but some still lived among them, in secret. The Heroes Guild of Albion was one of the most important structures in history. Under the guidance of Nostro, it pulled Albion back together and brought back peace and safety. It was home to so many iconic heroes, the Sword of Aeons, Avos Tyr, and vast tomes of knowledge and training. But, as it is always the case in tales of good and evil, it suffered the same fate as the Old Kingdom and Bright Lodge. Power corrupted the strongest, and it fell. As of now, for those brave enough to explore the ruins of the Heroes Guild underneath Millfields, they would find tunnels full of history and a sunken chamber that was once the host of a grand battle between the mighty hero of Oakvale and Jack of Blades. It did briefly become a refuge of sorts for Teresa, Garth, Hammer, and the hero of Bowerstone. But after that, if anyone did enter this fallen place, is unknown. This place had pulled all heroes from far and wide into one place to unite Albion. But it was also in this one place they had been executed in one fell swoop. Another action that came from the unification of Albion as a result of heroes. I will say that the Heroes Guild is absolutely the most iconic location in Fable. The second is Bowerstone. What I loved the most about researching and putting this video together was that I got to go back and explore Fable Legends. What a game! Sadly, it was cancelled, but all of the lore and information about that period of Albion was so interesting. I love how Bright Lodge was essentially the first attempt at a Heroes Guild, but because the game was cancelled, we will never know why it fell. I am loving exploring these games and breaking them down. So much care was put into this series by Lionhead Studios. I hope in the reboot, they show the same level of detail, maybe even more. There are still so many more topics I want to explore properly in this new series of lore. I would love to know who or what you would like me to look into more. So many locations, people, and items of significance. So many possibilities. That was everything I wanted to say. If you enjoyed this video, then I would love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments section below. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Queen Arby, Lewis, Ornex, Drakey Phoenix, Daniel Cal Drawings, 501st Clone Boy, Ruben Mendoza, Imperial Embers, Canifex, Jimsy, Average Sol, Azu, Jonas, Yellow Rodriguez, and Detroit. What did you think of this topic? What was your favourite part of the guild? I would say the inside of the demon door. And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.